Hello and welcome back to the All Out Brits Podcast, the podcast where we send the house on all things NFL from across the seas here in not so sunny old England at the moment. January weather getting us down a little bit, but as always, we're here to bring you a bit of sunshine and rainbows into your lives. And it was definitely sunshine, rainbows, and maybe a few storms in the NFL this week. We had plenty going on, as always. We had more 90-plus yard touchdowns than we did have points in the Panthers game for the Panthers. And we also had more tears in fantasy football than you would get at a prostate examination. So you know for a fact it's been a very good, a very painful, and slightly enjoyable week, some would argue. And as always, to join me on this journey and to talk about everything that we've had going on is the main man, Mr. Elliot Greenwood. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing really well, mate. I'm wearing my Christmas present, my LSU LVD top, Louisiana State, Livvy done on the back. Proud to represent. But yeah, doing really well. The NFL this week, lots of twists, lots of turns. And it's getting really exciting ahead of the playoffs. There's some really tasty fixtures that are coming up next week as well. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it in great detail, Mr. Sidhu.
Of course. And I'm getting a bit panicked because there's not too many weekends of Sunday night football left. So we better make the most of them. And everyone watching better enjoy them just as much as we are. And to run us through the action, in case anybody missed out on any of the big talking points or any of the big things that went on this week, Mr. Elliott, should we go through a 2-minute drill? The way that people wouldn't expect you start podcasts is by getting it rapidly to the very end. Right. Are you ready, mate?
I'm ready as I'll ever be, sir. Let's get it done.
Test out the new mic. Here we go.
So there we go. Great mic, mate, by the way, mate. Great mic. Browns versus the Jets. Flacco takes Cleveland to the playoffs. He's been a revolution of a QB in Cleveland. Absolutely elite. David Njoku as well had an absolute day, getting himself a Pro Bowl selection as well. Dallas versus Detroit. Big D 8-0 at home and 1 win away from claiming the NFC East. Dan Campbell just kick the PAT and none of the drama happens. Go for 1 point, sir. Moving on, Houston versus Tennessee. The rookies were getting it done. Stroud came back, had a really nice game, big win for him, and 2 sacks for Will Anderson Jr., not letting Will Levis settle at all. Bears versus the Falcons. DJ Moore had a brilliant day as Chicago wins, but feels he's playing for his career. 1 more game to show why he should be QB1 in Chicago. Ravens versus the Dolphins. In the wild, the biggest threat to the Dolphins is the Tiger Shark. In captivity, it's Lamar Jackson. 5 touchdowns for him on the day. And could we be seeing his second MVP? I think it's locked up at this point. Bucs versus the Saints. Unnecessary pressure has been put on Tampa Bay now. They're going into the last week where they could have rested the starters, but now they're having to play them in order to secure the division and get a playoff berth into Week 18. Buffalo versus New England. Bills scrape another win, but that's kind of what they do. After an opening kickoff return touchdown for New England, Bills are in a good position now to kind of win the division. Will they do it? It's a massive game this week against the Dolphins. Big game for Josh Allen as well. Eagles versus the Cardinals. I called it. I bloody called it. Kyler Murray had an absolute day. 3 touchdowns for him. And the Cardinals pretty much dominated the Eagles, I thought, in many respects. And could that be the last game at Lincoln Financial Field for the Eagles this season? We will see. Jacksonville versus Carolina. Carolina were just bad. They're just bad. It's an easy win for any team that plays them. And this week it was the Jags. And they're in a very nice spot with 1 more week to play. Colts versus the Raiders. It's the return of Minshew Mania. Absolutely brilliant for him. And Jonathan Taylor, very productive. But I do feel bad for Devontae Adams, who was on the losing side of this game. 13 receptions, 126 yards, and 2 touchdowns for him. Finally showing why he's one of the best receivers in the league. Giants versus the Rams. Stafford had a bit of a down game, but it doesn't matter because the Rams have got a running game now. Kyren Williams was absolutely superb. 3 touchdowns for him, and he's winning fantasy managers their leagues. So I'm sure everyone's happy if you've got Kyrie in your league. Commanders versus the Niners. Niners back to winning ways. But interestingly, in the final of the final of the fantasy playoffs, CMC had one of the worst games of his season. I don't think many managers will be thankful for him in that last week, but brought back to looking solid, which is what, as a Niners fan, you love to see, isn't it, sir?
Of course.
Bang, bang, Niners gone. Seahawks versus the Steelers. 2-touchdown day for Najee Harris, who looked very, very, very solid. And Mike Tomlin now secured another season without losing record. Never had a losing record in the NFL now. An absolutely elite head coach. Chiefs versus the Bengals. Chiefs back to winning ways after 3 straight losses. Pacheco had an absolute day. But a few interesting tweets about how he runs the ball. Some people saying that he runs like he bites people, runs like he's not allowed sugar at a party. He's just a mad guy when he's got that ball in the hand. But hey, he gets yards, so I'm not bothered. Broncos versus the Chargers. No, don't care. Not going to talk about it. Vikings versus the Packers. Jordan Love looked absolutely brilliant. 3 touchdowns for him and 256 yards in a very, very dominant win over division rivals. They are sitting in a very nice spot as well in that 7 seed for the playoffs. Will they be playoff bound? Only time will tell. And that is 2 minutes, boy.
Very well done. Very well executed as well. We're getting better. Getting much better. He needs a drink after that one, though.
I'm thirsty. It's thirsty work, 2 minutes, boy. I've never spoken so much in my life.
I find that hard to believe.
Sure, you did.
Should we look back at probably the biggest game of the week then? A game that we'd talked about quite a bit previously. The battle for the number 1 seed in the AFC. And it turned out to be much more like a massacre in the end than it did an actual battle. I don't know if you saw, but on Hard Knocks for the Dolphins, they sort of showed their walkthrough of how they were trying to set a plan up together to stop Lamar. Half the team must have been asleep because they clearly could not get that done. You mentioned as well in 2 Minute Drill, MVP. Do you think that was the final nail in the coffin? 56 put up against the Dolphins team, who are their big contenders in the AFC. Do you think that gives the trophy into Lamar's hand?
I think it's his to lose at this point. He's got to have a couple stinking weeks for him not to get MVP. He's going to sit this week with that 1 seed already secured. But all he needs is maybe 1, max, maybe 2 playoff wins just to kind of secure that MVP spot. But for me, over CMC now, it's got to be Lamar Jackson. A massive game for him, 5 touchdowns. And how solid did the Ravens just look overall? The defense were making plays, the offense were making plays, and they just looked really, really comfortable. On the flip side of that, the Dolphins looked like a disgrace. They didn't look like they deserved to be the number 2 spot, let alone a team that kind of should be in the playoffs. Tyreek was kind of really limited. The run game was limited with Mostert and A-Chain. And Tua didn't look like a Pro Bowl caliber QB. Obviously, he's been selected. But for me, in that game, he looked really, really poor. And it was on New Year's Eve. We were out celebrating. We were out ready to party. We were drinking. And that was one of the shocks of the night, I thought. Mm-hmm. I don't know what you thought about it, Tyron, but yeah, really, really shocking.
It was a massive surprise. I almost spat my Guinness out when I saw the scoreline by the time we'd widened our eyes and actually realised what the time was at that point. But I 100% agree with you. I think for me, we mentioned it so many times, the Dolphins just need a big scalp, just one really big scalp. And I think it'd give them a lot more credibility. They've got everything. They've got the players. They've got the coach. They've got the kit. They've got the stadium. They've got everything. Everything is set there for them to be an absolute mega franchise, for them to be battling every single year. But for some reason or another, they just fall short. And obviously, they probably will make against the playoffs. But how far will they go? Will it be a long playoff run? I'm not too sure about that. But it just doesn't seem to be clicking all the time for the Dolphins. And it doesn't seem to click mostly when they're up against big rivals and big competitors. But at the end of the day, the Ravens, we're very happy with that one. And it leaves the Dolphins with a very big clash going into the week after, or this week, shall we say, going into this week against the Bills. Where do you think the Dolphins then go? Say, for example, they go through the playoffs, they, win one game, lose another. What do they do next season? Because they've got everything there. What is the missing point of the Dolphins?
I think the first kind of priority for them is winning that game this week against the Bills. If they can get a home playoff game, that's massive for them. They play really, really, really well at the Hard Rock Stadium. But on the road, they're not as fantastic as they are at home. And that's kind of the same thing with a lot of teams, but more so the Miami Dolphins. And when you're playing teams that are always going to be above 500 in the playoffs, and they're typically teams that the Dolphins have struggled to beat, let alone beat at all. They've only beaten one. they need that home field advantage. They need as much as they can get. But if they lose this week to the Bills and drop all the way down to the 5 seed as a wildcard team, it's an absolute disaster class waiting to happen for Tua. What they need to do, for me, I think Tua needs to look a little bit more settled. He looks a lot of the time quite panicked in the pocket when you get after and you put pressure in his face. So I think next season he needs to kind of progress to the point where he is a little bit more calm, a little bit more composed, and that's down to Josh McDaniels and the offense to kind of help him do that. I think they need to add another talent on the offensive line because he's been sacked a lot as well. So if in the draft there's a decent O lineman available, probably a guard, I would say, if they can get a decent guard in the draft, that's going to share the offensive line for years and years to come. But the receiving core, absolutely stacked. Running backs, absolutely stacked. So for me, it's down to that O-line, and that's probably the area that I think they need to strengthen in the most. I don't know how you see the Dolphins kind of moving forward, Taryn, but I don't see them winning a playoff game, to be honest with you, at all, no matter where they're seeded. But is that just my opinion, or do you kind of share that?
Glazers out, I say. I'm waiting to see how long it is before the Miami fans start chanting that and blaming all the owners because, there's a bit of precedent for that, I think. But
Absolutely,
I definitely agree with you. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be a long journey for the Miami Dolphins. It seems like it's going to be a flash in the pan. And it'll be a sort of a swift end to what's been a really good season where they've looked literally like the best offense at times in the NFL and sometimes looked like the most incomplete team. But we'll move forward to a team which looked like the most complete team, and now, for some reason or another team that just aren't clicking like we know them to be doing, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles. What on earth is going on in Philly? You said it. You did say it. I hold my hands up. You predicted it very well that the Cardinals and Kyler Murray would get the job done over Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. But it all seems to be coming out now. I know A.J. Brown's been talking this week and blaming the players, and no one's been, pointing fingers at coaches, but apparently there's been in-locker fights. There's been loads of drama going on. I always judge what goes on with the Eagles based on Kelsey on the New Heights podcast, because you can tell with him when he's a bit more subdued, things aren't great. And when he's upbeat, things are going very well for the Eagles. So you can tell things aren't right there. But what is going wrong?
A lot's going wrong, and I'm absolutely loving it. The Cowboys are now 1 win. We love it. It's when you start a season without losing a game in 10 games. I called it. We both kind of discussed it that they weren't the best 10-0 team ever. They were nowhere near that. And I saw a very interesting stat that if the one possession games in the NFL this season were flipped and went the other way, the Eagles would only have 6 wins. And I think that is massive. So the winning, obviously they won games, but they won tight games that they should have won anyway, and they were kind of just scraping along. The game itself was an absolute car crash from start to finish for Jalen Hurts and the entire team, really. And for me, it's a coaching matter. Last season, they were absolutely brilliant, and obviously they've lost key parts of the coaching staff. They've lost key coordinators, and I think that's massively impacted them. The offense just isn't clicking as much as it was last season. It's just not looking as formidable at all. The Cardinals, though, I thought they were absolutely brilliant. And why was that? They dominated the ball. They had nearly 40 minutes time of possession, and that's because they ran the ball. They ran at the heart of the Philadelphia team, which is something that not many teams have done, to be honest. Obviously, we've heard a lot of criticism being said about the secondary and the linebacker core of the Philadelphia Eagles, with that defensive front always kind of showing up. But this week, allowing James Conner to get 128 yards and a rushing touchdown, the touchdown ultimately sealed the game for the Cardinals. They kind of folded this week for the first time in a while. I thought that was absolutely fantastic to see from Kyler and the Cardinals. And thank you, Kyler Murray, because you've secured a home playoff game for my Cowboys. So for that, I will be forever grateful, Kyler Murray. You little man, but you are brilliant. You are gorgeous, and I love you because a playoff game in AT&T, that means that the Cowboys are winning all the way, and we're going to the Super Bowl, boy. And you can't even dispute that. You can't.
You've always got to bring it back to the Cowboys, haven't you? You can't give it a day. Always got to bring it back. But I 100% agree with you there. I think with the Eagles, and it seems to be the case where I look at the Chiefs as well, is when you sort of know how formidable the offense is, the defense never normally has to be sort of the saving grace for the team. They never have to be the one that pull them through games, maybe every so often, but not every single week. And this season, we've seen that, for example, the Chiefs D and obviously the Eagles D, they've been relied on quite a bit this season. And that's just left a lot of problems, I think. And I think, like you mentioned there, the coordinators and sort of that's caused a lot of issues within the franchise. And it just seems to be that it's really weird that the two Super Bowl matchup teams and franchises have been really hit and miss this year, even though they looked absolutely formidable sort of last year. And it just shows how fast things keep moving in the NFL.
Absolutely, mate. And how high scoring was that Super Bowl last season?
Yeah.
So it must have been a bit of an indicator for the coordinators at the time that if good teams can put massive amount of points on the board against us, we need to kind of invest in our defenses. And that's obviously the Eagles got Jalen Carter, but other than that, they've not really invested massively. But again, they invested in the D line, which we all knew was fantastic. They should have invested in the secondary. But yeah, both teams put up 35 points against each other in the Super Bowl. So it should have been a bit of a predecessor there of where they should have gone with the rookies, and where they've gone subsequently has caused both teams to kind of really be punished this season.
Yeah, it has indeed. And I think we'll move to a team that isn't as free scoring this season, a team that's really struggled, and a team, unfortunately, who were unable to put any points up this weekend, and that was the Carolina Panthers. Now, we all know Carolina Panthers have had a really, really rough season. Obviously, Bryce Young, number 1 overall pick, all eyes were going to be on him. But he's come into a program, come into a franchise where just not everything's there for him. We always say Mahomes needs some help, but I think we definitely agree that Bryce Young needs some help as well. Obviously, the Jags get the win without Trevor Lawrence playing at quarterback, but it helps their cause for the playoffs too. But the Panthers, what are they going to look at going forward? Because, it's too soon, I think, to be saying, Bryce Young's a bust. I think he's shown enough this season. He has got it in him. He has got the ability to be the quarterback that they want him to be. But it's also shown quite a bit that he needs a lot of help around him.
Absolutely, mate. There's not been a decent quarterback in Carolina since Cam Newton won his MVP. Many
Darnold
years.
were there. Sam Darnold were there, pal. Don't forget that.
Because he's doing a lot. He's doing a lot for you right now, isn't he, Sam Darnold? He's coming in and throwing interceptions.
Though, isn't he? System quarterback.
Oh well, everyone's a system quarterback in Sam fan, mate. But Bryce Young, yeah, it's way too early to call him a bust. He's a small man though. He's a small man. I say small, 6'1". That's small for you, Taryn. For us big lads,
I'll behave yourself.
I'm 6'2". I'm 6'2". On a good day, I've got a new pair of shoes now, so I'm 6'2".
Good on you.
Thank you, mate. But when you throw the ball to an elderly receiving core, to Adam Thielen, who's your wide receiver 1, you're gonna struggle. And that offensive line is absolutely terrible. So for me, obviously they need to invest in a head coach that understands Bryce Young and wants to play with Bryce Young, because there was a lot of reports coming out around draft time that Frank Reich didn't really believe in Bryce Young and he wanted to go for CJ Stroud, but because the Panthers traded up in the draft, they kind of felt like they had to go for Young. So I think a head coach needs to be kind of selected who believes in Bryce Young, and then they need to invest in the receiving core and the offensive line. It's never ever a bad idea to invest in your offensive line, no matter who you are. All the big teams do it. The best teams in the NFL have a really good offensive line. You look at the Lions this season, how they've been able to transform Jared Goff. It's because of that O-line. Give Bryce Young some help on the outside, but also give him time to throw to his receivers. So for me, it's got to be a wide out that they've got to get, but they can't get a big one. They can't get a big one in the draft because they don't obviously have an early draft pick like they should do. They should have the number 1 overall pick, but because they've been so heavy in the investment for Bryce Young, that's just not unfortunately something that they've got. So it needs to be an O-lineman and it has to be a receiver for me. What do you think, Taryn?
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I think it just shows how important these picks are and getting players right and then sort of scouting right. Obviously, with the Niners, we saw the same thing with Trey Lance. You're trading away a lot. And if it all goes wrong, then you're sort of left in a circumstance where you really do need a bit of help for that. And I think that's what we're seeing here in the Panthers is they've traded a lot and they've given away a lot and they haven't got what they wanted back just yet. But as you mentioned, if they invest, if they can sort of give him a system, actually, give him a system where he can sort of thrive in, a system he can do well in, I think he's going to be okay. But obviously, it's left the Bears in a position where they could go on and really kick on. We mentioned this last week. I think the Bears, if they draft wisely this year, it might be a scary proposition seeing what goes on in Chicago, whether they have Caleb Williams, whether they trade the draft capital of the number 1 overall pick, whether they trade the draft capital of Caleb Williams, or whether they get rid of Justin Fields. Either way, they've got picks, they've got bank, and they've got everything there for someone to come in and be absolutely successful.
Mate, spot on. And with the Bears, obviously, now they've kind of got a system in place for Fields. Do they kind of continue with that? Obviously, he's not been shocking this season. He's got them to 6 wins so far, and he has made steps. Now he's got a wide out on the side, and now he's got a bit more of an O-line. Do they keep investing in that? Do they go for Marvin Harrison Jr.? But also, you mentioned, and I love bringing it back to San Fran, you mentioned Trey Lance and how much capital San Francisco gave up for him. And that's a really, really unique situation. Is that Trey Lance trade? Obviously, three first round picks. Having a stinker here, Taz. Three first round picks. And it's but obviously it didn't work out. And it's kind of like a millionaire investing in a stock that absolutely plummets. But then with the last money that he's got, he buys a lottery ticket and wins it all. That's kind of what's happened in getting Brock Purdy. But that can't happen for every team. It's not going to happen for Carolina. It's not going to happen for another team for 100 years. You got very lucky with that, Torren, and I think you'll say that you have as well.
Of course, I'm very glad that we've got a Brock Purdy that's come in clutch. So I'm very, very happy about that. Well, all that talk about failing franchises, mate, it's got me thinking about failing franchises in a fantasy league because we found out this week that somebody has been condemned to the punishment. Why don't we head over and start talking a little bit about our fantasy league? The final week, the Super Bowl champion has been declared, and the forfeit has been decided and delivered. I'll let you kick off first, mate, and talk through this season.
The season itself has been one of many learning curves have been had. Many people have kind of come into fantasy not knowing kind of how to play it, and plays have been picked and chosen. Some have been busts, some have been absolutely sensational, some absolute heroes for us in the draft. Players have been picked up off the waiver wire. You look at Devon A-Chain, Raheem Mostert. None of those players were kind of drafted for us. As well, Kyron Williams. Then you may have stars and heroes in Christian McCaffrey. Justin Jefferson was an absolute bust. Jamar Chase, a little bit of a bust. And CD Lamb coming to be wide receiver number 1. It's been a beautiful, beautiful season of fantasy football. Unfortunately, my brother decided to win it this season after I did his team for the first 6 weeks. Something that he has no doubt made me very much aware of and will continue to make me aware of every time I answer the phone to him. But the main attraction of the week was obviously that losing bracket, the losing game. It was Taz versus another manager in the league, and one manager got 129 points, the other got 128. One manager left loads of points on the bench, noticeably starting Jake Ferguson and leaving out QB 1, tight end 1, running back 1 in Taysom Hill, and that has ultimately cost him to be last in the league and to have the forfeit. So without further ado, the worst player in the Show Me Your TDs fantasy league of a 2023-24 season, Mr. Terrence Sidhu, welcome to the stage. Welcome to the stage, sir. How are you feeling? Talk me through what was going through your mind when the draft was coming in, and how do you feel now at this point where you are the LVP, the least valuable player of the league? Go on, talk to me, boy. Talk to me.
I've talked previously on this podcast that the thought of a date with a blow-up doll doesn't faze me. Because I've been on dates with worse, and as the moment crept closer, as the points kept accumulating, the thought of the silicon I'm not used to just did start dawning on me. I did start getting a bit shaky, I must be honest. And we mentioned on the pod as well, I said I might have to back my players that have got me this far. And unfortunately, with it being New Year's Eve and in a mildly inebriated state, we could argue, I did not start Mr. Taysom Hill. I let Jake Ferguson go and take the reins. I know he played a few nights before, but clearly I was on something before then. And yes, I somehow stayed up to watch the Vikings game. I watched Justin Jefferson miss it by a toenail, a touchdown which would have saved me. But no, unfortunately, yes, I am the loser this year. Again, I'm going to leave it to the rest of the league managers to organise, everything, because they could not organise a piss up in a brewery, and that will become evident when this punishment comes around. And maybe we'll make it a live event for everyone to come and watch, join, celebrate.
A little meet and greet.
Meet and greet.
Meet and greet in Melbourne.
Me and my new girlfriend. Yeah, it'd be great. That'd be a really good teaser for everybody, I think. Might upset a few people, but we're used to that, aren't we, Elliot? But as I mentioned, I'll be back. I'll be back stronger. I'll draft better. I'm going to sell a kidney to win this fantasy combine that we've got for this number 1 pick. And I am pretty sure that I'm going to come back and win next year. Mark my words.
It's not the first time that you're going to have a bit of a stinky time with plastic on a night out, Taz. And I'm sure it won't be the last. You're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to take you to a lovely restaurant. All your lovely ladies. We're going to make sure that she's 6 foot as well. So she's definitely going to be taller than you, which is one thing that a lot of girls don't like in a man. But yeah, you can have a great time. Have you got any sort of ideas on what cuisine you'd like to eat, or any of the food that you kind of fancying, or the sort of the dress attire? Have you got a suit ready? Go on, talk me through. How do you get ready for a first date, Taryn?
Well, it depends on what time your mum wants me to pick her up, to be
fair. Shut up. She's one of the only people that listens to this pod as well. Disgusting.
We'll move forward before you get upset with me. But you know what? I'm prepared. I'm mentally ready. I'm going to have a great time. She, it, they, whatever it is, they're going to have a great time as well. Whether I make it into the restaurant, make it out the restaurant with a fully inflated date, we'll have to wait and see and find out. But cuisine-wise, when you're brown, beige don't age, baby. And once you've gone brown, you can't go back. And that's why she's going to have some taste of the Indian lifestyle. Treat her to a bit of that, and hopefully it blows her up. And so date ends faster as soon as possible.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be left. You don't want to be left feeling deflated after that date all the time.
Oh, it's absolutely terrible. Right, we're going to kill this. We're going to nip this in the bud and move forward. You just always have to bloody ruin it, don't you? Always have to ruin it.
Sorry,
we'll head to the sideline. We'll head into the sideline before you can carry on talking. Get out of here. We'll get some refreshments and get going with a sideline question this week, which I think we'll have a little bit of debate about. We've seen this week the college playoffs are coming towards their end, with the final coming up soon as well. We've seen this year a lot of money being thrown about. We've seen a lot of interesting sort of programs. Obviously, the big talking one has been Colorado and Coach Prime over there, everything like that. But there's been loads of different programs which have really excelled, and loads of players that have excelled as well. And we know for a fact these players are bringing in the moolah, they're bringing in the money. But we know that declaring for the draft can sometimes mean that you don't make as much money as a rookie in the NFL. So the big talking point, if you were given the opportunity, if you led your program, your own state, your own college to glory, you come out with a Heisman Trophy. You're regarded as one of the hottest prospects possibly ever seen in NFL history, and you know that you're making a lot of money regardless of what you do. What are you doing then, Elliot? Are you going to stick with the college program, maybe stay another year, see what you can do, or are you going to declare for the draft and probably end up at one of the worst teams in the divisions, and maybe end up dealing with what Bryce Young's having to deal with at the moment? What are you thinking?
Well, obviously, as one of the best draft prospects coming out of this year's class, this is an issue that I'm kind of discussing with my family at this point as well. Yeah, it's a tough decision to make, to be honest with you. Obviously, kind of in college now, you can accept money before you weren't allowed to. So the NCAA have changed the rules, which is fantastic for college athletes because they're no longer just kind of benefiting in taking all the money for themselves, which was an absolute disgrace from the NCAA, and they need to be called out for it and hand the money back. The fact that players like Baker Mayfield and Tim Tebow didn't get a wage until they came into the NFL is an absolute disgrace, in my opinion. And kind of that's why they've done it. So not only an incentive for players to stay in the NCAA, but it's also a little bit more of a guarantee. You don't know when a career-ending injury is going to kind of come. Does it come when you're playing for your college team before you kind of go to the draft? Does it come when you're in the NFL in one of your first games? It's just one of those things that we can't really tell. Obviously, Ryan Shazier on the Pittsburgh Steelers, superb in college, and then he had a career-ending injury in pretty much his first season in Pittsburgh. So that means that he doesn't get the financial reward that he's been training for 20 plus years. For me, I would say stay in college as long as you can. The money's guaranteed. The success is guaranteed. Sometimes the players in college have kind of a bit more status about them, kind of a little bit more freedom, a bit more fun. They're going to go to the parties afterwards that you can't go to in the NFL. And I just think college football in general has so much more of a community feel about it. You go down, you support your university. Obviously, university in this country is not as massive as it is over there, but you still have that university pride. You still go to all the football games. You still support your team. But in America, it's massive. You're getting 100,000 seater stadiums being sold out, and the entire community gets involved. And for me, if you can be a hero on campus, that's a hero that I want to be. What about you, Taryn? Are you declaring for the NFL draft, or are you going to go for back-to-back Heisman trophies?
Well, when you're a once-in-a-generation defensive front player like me, where everyone's after you, maybe didn't get a Heisman because it's not really a pass rusher award, we could argue.
It's not. It's a QB award, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, unfortunately. So maybe I feel undervalued. Maybe I feel like I'm not being treated as well as I could be. And I think I probably would just declare for the draft, just because it's the Holy Land, isn't it? It's the place everywhere wants to be. If I end up with a stinking team, I end up with a stinking team. But we're ride or die. You know what I mean? Like, I'm here for the origin stories. I'm here for the plot. And you know what? If we have to go from the bottom and make our way all the way to the top, I'll do that. That's the faith I have in my abilities, I think. So I think I would probably declare and be the one sat there undrafted at the end of it. But yeah, we're all about confidence. It's all about confidence. But everything you said, all I heard was you saying he's going to follow whatever Livvy Dunn does. So, you know.
Bro, you're going to get me in so much trouble again. I'm not here for it. The sofa doesn't look as comfortable this evening, mate. You've got to be nice to me. But obviously, the NFL is the pinnacle of American sports. I'm quickly moving on from that comment, bro. It's the pinnacle of American sports. It is the sport in North America. And yeah, I kind of see where you kind of go with that. Obviously, if you don't feel valued as a D lineman, I do understand. But as a QB that I am, I'm just going to shut up. This is just pure waffle at this point, mate. Right? Take us home, pal. Come on.
Let's call it a night, and before you end up in a sleeping bag or worse on the streets. What a wonderful podcast, as always. Full of thrills, full of enjoyment, and hopefully full of a few DMs afterwards. Maybe I'm hoping, interested? No? Okay, you find out for me, mate.
I think Livvy Dunn's interested in me. I think that's the DM that you're on about. I think, it's good.
Yeah, that's what I was on about, of course.
I can play baseball as well if she wants. I don't mind what sport.
Dual threat athlete, clearly.
That's me.
But thank you, everybody, for joining us this week on the All Out Brits podcast. As always, we hope that by providing you all the content you need on YouTube, Spotify, and TikTok, that we'll be sending you back for more and sending you back for more drama, more issues, more problems, and more enjoyment, most importantly. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next time on the All Out Brits podcast.
See ya!